So let's give a warm welcome to Steve Wozniak. Well, first of all, Janet is delightful. I mean, she is fantastic.
I'm the lucky one.
You're the lucky one. So I thought what we do is sort of start at the beginning, if we can. You were a really prolific engineer almost by age 6. So tell me a little bit about what it was about sort of your childhood and your mentors that got you to be so good so early.
You know, I don't know. My father was an electrical engineer. I loved going and watching him do his little things, twiddling knobs and making patterns on screens, you know, when I was very young. And he never pushed us, though, to be engineers, to be mathematical or anything. He let us choose our own ways. So out of 3 siblings, I'm the only one that said, I want to be an engineer like you. And my second goal was to be a teacher. And I don't know, science fair projects, when I had questions, how do you take this little building block, you know, an electronic neuron called a transistor, how do you make it make decisions? And he would show me on a blackboard and really taught me. And I was doing these projects in elementary school. I had no idea. Now that I look back, they were equivalent to like graduate level courses. Yeah. You know,
and so he was a technology guy himself, wasn't he, your dad?
He was an electrical engineer. And I found that electronics, you built things that were kind of neat. Sort of like the things you do in life that you can show off. If you bought some new fancy clothing or something, you could show it off. And to me, that was kind of cool to be able to do these things that other people looked at and, wow, you did that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And so you were winning all these sort of science fair contests and stuff like that. And what were some of the things that you were building back then?
Good Lord. I built a huge project, hundreds of parts, nailed into wood actually, and soldering, connecting all the electronic parts to play tic-tac-toe and never lose the game. I did and that one, and that was kind of cool. I also got a ham radio license in elementary school. And those were back in the days when you got a kit full of parts in a box with instructions of how to bolt it together, how to solder it together, how to run string wires on tuning dials, and how to hook up antennas on your roof. And I studied, I got my license, and that was just one after another after another. I built machines that could add and subtract numbers in the computer language of base 2. So I grew up, I'm very mathematical. I was also the top math student in my schools. So not only was I in electronics, which often is treated as a vocational course. It's like you're really good at auto shop. You know, I was good at electronics, but I was also good at the math and science in the schools. So, but I was also treated very much like a geek. I was a social outsider. You know, he's an electronic genius, but I didn't know how to talk, the normal talk that kids grow up learning how to talk about things going on in their life and all that. And so I didn't really socialize much and worked mostly in my own head, including developing my own philosophies of life. That's just part of how you grow up. But you know, I was so good. In high school, I got to where I could look at a description of a computer, an IBM computer, a Varian computer, a Hewlett-Packard computer, a digital equipment computer. Look at the description, and I could sit down in my room alone, and I got to the point that I could design any computer in the world in about 2 days. And I could only do it on pencil and paper because I could never afford one single chip, the building blocks of computers. I could never afford anything. Just did it on paper over and over and over, trying to make mathematical kind of puzzles in my head. How can I redesign it and use fewer parts? And I'd go through all the manuals of the different parts and figure out clever schemes. So I prided myself. You always pride yourself on what you're good at. Those are your values in life. And I was good at designing things better than other people, meaning fewer parts.
So you're designing this stuff. That was back in the day that video games were starting to get popular.
Oh, this is way before that. This is even way before that. Okay. Eventually, during my college years, video games came along. Atari Corporation was starting a revolution, you know, that games could be played on television sets. And they were in arcades. And they did this in the town I live in now, Los Gatos, California. So proud of that town. We've got Netflix, and that's where we invented the pet rock. Gary Dahl, the inventor of the pet rock, still lives in Los Gatos, so I'm proud to be there. And Atari would be making games on TVs, but all their games used black and white televisions, because back in those days, color televisions were so expensive, and they were so hard and took more parts in the day that these electronic parts were very expensive still to build projects like that. But they started the electronic game business, and I love games. When, I saw Pong, and you know what I said? I said, oh my gosh, you can use a television for an output device that people can actually see. Oh my gosh, I have a television at home. I don't have to pay any money. I have a free output device, and my gosh, I know everything about digital design. I can design anything I want to put paddles and balls on my TV. So I went and built my own little Pong game, and it had 28 little $1 chips. And if you missed the ball, it put up a little 4-letter word, like heck. Darn. And that was fun. Now, in those days, by then I'd been through a little bit of college. I had met Steve Jobs, and we'd done things together. We'd even started selling things together, because we were going to have every time I designed something fun, nifty, just for my own entertainment, Steve would come into town or come by, and he'd see it, and he'd say, let's sell it. And he would turn them into money. For 5 years before we started Apple, we had been doing this. The Apple I was like the 5th time that he turned something I designed into money. And he was always spirited to, oh my gosh, go find a few little bucks, because he didn't have a job. I had a job. I didn't have a college degree, but I was working as an engineer designing the hottest products of the day, which were the little handheld calculators from Hewlett-Packard that every scientist and engineer had to have for, instead of slide rules. Yeah, that was, those were great times. I got a reputation. Aside from the stuff that I did with Steve Jobs, I had a reputation of being this little 20-something-year-old kid that would design anything for anybody for free. It's like I would go to, when I was in college, I would type all night long, 6 to 8 hours, a term paper for friends, and I would only charge a nickel. I loved typing. I don't know how to explain this. When you have a passion, you do it. When I bought my engineering books in school, my computer books, I would go through them on Saturday and Sunday without sleeping at all, answering every single question, and I'd be halfway through the book before the class started on Monday, because it was in my heart to do these things. So anyway, wherever we were.
So you're a great engineer. You're doing some stuff with video games. You're working at HP. Right,
working at HP.
You're moonlighting. You're moonlighting.
I've got my own apartment.
Right, so
and I would design things for people. I actually met a guy in Hollywood, and I designed the digital part of the first hotel movie system. Go back and imagine there were no movies in hotels at one time. This was just incredible projects I got into all the time, and a whole bunch of them. Steve Jobs would spot them and say, "Oh, we had no money." But he'd say, "I know how we can make a PC board and go sell a bunch of these to a local company." Little terminals that you could talk to the faraway computers of the early inspiration for the internet. It was called the ARPANET back then. But all these kind of projects, every time I did one, Steve would say, I know how we can sell it. So when we started Apple, it was really just saying, hey, we're solidifying something we've been doing for 5 years.
But really the concept around the Apple II, which is probably one of the most successful products in the history, right?
Yeah, really the Apple II really made the company. And all of the features and the ideas were in my head, but it was mainly because I had thought of such great technical features. I wanted them to get to people, but I knew it was going to be a fun machine. Nobody ever imagined a computer would have color, a low-cost computer, because it cost $1,000 to create color. And somehow an idea popped in my head one night when I was without sleep, 4 days and nights, no sleep, designing Breakout for Atari with Steve Jobs. And I did all the design, he did the wiring. But that's how we were. As a matter of fact, he took my Pong thing down to Atari, and that's how he got a job. I don't know if they knew that he didn't design it, but so I don't know, whatever I was talking about.
So you got the Apple II, and you start to sell that, and it takes off like gangbusters.
Sure. Yeah, the Apple II. Oh, yeah, that's right. I did color with a $1 chip. I thought in my head, every engineering book, I knew all the engineering of color television, mixing mathematical sine waves in the right proportions, red, blue, and green, and precision parts, and it cost $1,000. And an idea popped in my head one night because I was on the Atari floor while Steve was breadboarding my Breakout game, and I saw they only had black and white TVs. there was a dot moving left and right, changing color, red, green, blue, yellow. And I'm thinking maybe they have Mylar on the TV, but I couldn't see it. And I went back and I started thinking, color television. I know how color television signals work in the old analog TV days. Oh my gosh, I know digital electronics. What if I put a little $1 chip, could hold 4 ones and zeros. If I put those ones and zeros onto a line, that's like plus and minus, 1 and 0, put the signal onto a wire into a television, every television in the world would think it was color, but it would never be described in any engineering book that way. It was illegal. I'm sure Apple would not allow it to this day. And yet it worked. I don't think anybody ever created it before me or after. Well, certainly not. It was $1 instead of $1,000 to get color and the gaming and everything. You could change things on the screen so fast you could play games. That had never been done in computers before. Yep. A lot of different clever ideas. That Apple II, my engineer friends at Hewlett-Packard looked at it and they said, this is the best product I've ever seen. By the way, Hewlett-Packard turned me down 5 times for personal computers. 5 times. I wanted them to do it. I was so loyal to my company. I was an engineer for life. I was never going to leave Hewlett-Packard. But they turned me down. And the engineers knew that was a great, great product. I showed it to Steve Jobs. And we weren't going to give this one away for free like I gave away the Apple I for free. I gave it away to everybody before Steve Jobs even knew it existed, actually, because that's my nature.
So you guys got this product. You're selling like hotcakes. You're selling it to a local guy in San Jose.
By the Apple II, we were started selling them all over the country.
Okay.
There were maybe about 20 computer stores by then. Little mom and pop, hole in the walls in a strange part of a city, but they were starting to spring up, and the Apple II was so far above anything else.
Yeah. So what else was in the marketplace back then that you were competing with?
Actually, there was about nothing. A bunch of people had this idea that you copy Intel's data sheets. They would sell a microprocessor, which is the brains, and they would show a picture on paper of how it connects to memory chips of a certain expensive kind. So a bunch of people would put together kits of parts. You'd bolt it together, you'd solder things in place, and you'd have yourself a working device with switches and lights like the computers of the old days, and it called itself a computer, but it couldn't do anything useful. You couldn't I want to write a chess program, I'm going to type it in. You couldn't do that. It was, by the time you got it to where you could do that, you had to buy Bill Gates' BASIC for the Intel microprocessor, and you had to buy thousands of dollars worth of cards of memory to plug in because they used the lousy, expensive kind of memory. No, so I was, this Apple II, there was absolutely no comparison to it. You pull it out of the box, you turn it on, it goes beep, and it's waiting for you to type. All these other little things calling themselves computers, except for Commodore and Radio Shack. They came out slightly after our Apple II. But all the other ones were these little kits that you'd pull it out of the box, you'd build it for a couple of weeks or a week, and then you'd flip some switches and push a button and get some ones and zeros into memory. You could call it the heart of a computer, but it was really not useful for solving things. The Apple II was it.
Yep.
Yeah, we knew that was going to be a real company and a possibility of a big company. And too bad I had to leave Hewlett-Packard. I didn't want to.
Yep. So I want to get to a little bit to your relationship with Steve Jobs, because now you guys built this company. You're really the brains of the operation in terms of the engineering and the product development. He's sort of the marketing guy, then making the deals. But talk a little bit about, was there any friction there? He was a very controlling guy later in life, but
well, in our friendship years leading up to Apple, oh no, he was joker. He was a very different personality. But the time we started Apple, he saw he was a founder of a company and he was going to insert himself at the highest positions, but he couldn't really be justified to have any executive title. He didn't have any experience in those regards. So our funder, who owned as much of the company as Steve and I did, you never hear about him, Mike Markkula. Our funder ran marketing, determined we would be a marketing-driven company. Marketing would come up with the ideas for the next products and the pricing and tell engineering to build it. And the funny thing is we had no successes for the next 10 years. Only that one product that we started the company with, the Apple II. It's great when you have a lot of retry chances because of high revenues from one hit product. And Steve Jobs would just continually, at first, ask a lot of questions and challenge the people up above. Why is the box done this way? Why is this person doing the testing? Why doesn't the engineer do the testing? And he was constantly in there, and I just shut up. I figured better to shut up and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and leave no doubt. Because, I mean, I haven't done things like marketing my whole life, and people have done it for 20 years. So Mike Markkula told us, here are the kinds of people you have to hire. Here's the professional level you have to look for. Here's what their job responsibilities are. In a tech company, he formed the whole a technology company. He was really the one who led us in the early days. And Steve was always wanting to be there at the top, but he couldn't really find his way to operational success, except here's what he did that was so great. You know what? I can design a product with a bunch of wires on the ground and type on a keyboard, and a wire snakes into my TV and I can show things off, but you need a product that people will buy. And so Steve Jobs did all the steps that took my design to complete it, to get a plastic case made, to get a power supply, to get the bolts, and to, you know, and to make it, you know, and get a manual started. So really, he was more responsible for turning it into a product and convincing the world of why this is a good thing for you in your homes. And he was strongly influenced by Mike Markkula, who taught us both. You've got to make a product look good. And it's got to look easy and friendly to normal people if it's going to go into the home. It can't look like computers of the old days. And that was where Steve got started in the earliest days of Apple.
I want to get to an issue here, because the Apple III was a disaster.
Okay, so Steve wanted to run the company,
right?
But indirectly, he never had a title, but he just dealt with everybody at the top in the business room. And I wanted to be an engineer only and stay out of trouble, because I figured I was so weak that I'd be kicked out. These guys, you know, they have backstabbing. You've heard all these words. It's political. And we're in our young 20s. You know, we've never had any money in our life, and I'm afraid I'm just going to get kicked out of the company. I'll do engineering because nobody can beat me. So we were actually in different parts of the company. Of course, we met in all the major staff meetings and product meetings that were going on.
Right. But you pretty much did the Apple II yourself. Then the Apple III comes along, right? Riding on the coattails of the Apple II. That product didn't work very well.
The Apple III,
why not?
It's odd. What happened was, we had the Apple II at first, little cassette tapes to read in your programs, very clumsy and awkward to use. You couldn't type, run a program, and it would run. It was an awkward system. And one day, we were offered the chance. Apple was going to be able to go to Las Vegas to the Consumer Electronics Show, along with the other two personal computer companies, Radio Shack and Commodore. And Apple was only going to send 3 people. I was excited. Las Vegas. I would love to see Las Vegas. I've heard about that fancy city of lights. And we were only going to send 3 people: marketing, Mike Markkula, Steve Jobs, and I think our president, Mike Scott, or maybe our sales guy, Gene Carter. And, you know, I was too shy to say, hey, can you send me? I want to see Las Vegas. That doesn't sound pure. So I raised my hand in the staff meeting and I said, if we have a floppy disk, can we show it? Mike Markkula said, yes. Well, here's the thing. The show is in 2 weeks. If I could design a floppy disk drive in 2 weeks where you could type run checkbook and it would run the checkbook program, I would get to go see Las Vegas. The fact that I had never worked with any disk drive, hardware or software in my life, didn't matter. I was smart enough to figure something out, and I started analyzing a little new disk drive from Shugart that was smaller, and looked at it and took out tons of their chips that weren't needed, because I was really good about getting rid of chips when they weren't needed, and running wires over it. I came up with this tiny little circuit with 8 little $1 chips. And I said, how come everybody else makes them with 50 chips, and one of those chips is a real expensive one designed to do the whole disk job? I said, I must have left something out. My disk drive, I know, will do what I need to play games, to solve my work at Hewlett-Packard. I just guess it won't do the financial stuff, you know, that big companies buy big mainframes for. And then I studied a competitor's design. I saw that mine did more. Wow, in 2 weeks, I got to go to Las Vegas. And I had a programmer in high school, 17-year-old Randy Wigington, taught him how to play craps. He won $35. So proud of that. But we also introduced the floppy disk drive. Here's what happened. After the floppy disk drive, more importantly, the first spreadsheet program, VisiCalc, came out. VisiCalc could only be run on the Apple II because the Commodore and the Radio Shack didn't have enough memory and they were not expandable. our Apple II was hugely expandable, huge amounts of memory, so we could run the spreadsheet, and it was called VisiCalc. Instantly, our sales shot up 10 times because every small businessman in the world walked into a computer store, used the product for half an hour, and saw that they had done more work than they could do in 10 years on pencil and paper, making changes to income and expense categories in January and seeing the results instantly in June or December. And our sales shot up sky high. We were a made company. We were going to go public with one of those big outstanding offers. And it was really, the combination of the hardware and software made a good solution for us.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I should tell everybody that Steve's going to take some audience questions for 15 or 20 minutes, so you can think about what you might want to ask him, but I'll make sure there's time for that. So
So anyway, we veered towards the business market. We said, well, the business guys, not me, I wasn't actually involved. I was kind of working on disk drive stuff and clever other software and solving problems for the Apple II and designing versions for European television and the Arab world where the characters type from right to left. And I'm busy with all those things, and they started this project. The Apple III was going to be the business version of our Apple II computer. By this point in time, the Apple II had thousands of programs that were selling like hotcakes, and we wanted to have those programs have value. So we designed the app, but the Apple III was very different. It wouldn't run the same floppy disks. It wouldn't run the same programs. So we built a switch into the Apple III. You could boot it up, beep, and it comes up as an Apple II, or you flip the switch the other way, turn it on, and it boots up as an Apple III. It can be one computer or the other. Apple II for lots of games and educational programs, the Apple III for business. And it's really funny, marketing had us in engineering put in extra chips, spend extra money to disable the features the businessmen wanted on when it booted up as an Apple II. It disabled the extra memory. It disabled the extra columns on a screen so you could see a bigger spreadsheet, because we were trying to push. It's a push instead of a pull strategy. Pull is when you do something so good, people want it. Push is when you kind of try to direct them and force them a certain direction, and we forced them to boot up as an Apple III for business. As an Apple II, you could only have home and hobby, the very simplest programs there were. And that was probably a bad mistake, but we had other problems with the Apple III, and it failed. Yeah,
that product was, the design of that was very different in the sense that when you did the Apple II, you basically did it yourself. The Apple III, as I understand it, was a committee.
Yeah.
Right? And that just didn't work.
Yeah, the Apple III was, well, it was not only a committee, but it was more closed up. How it worked was more hidden from the public. I had learned about computers by stumbling across articles written by other people working in the computer field, looking at their programs, looking at their designs, and oh my gosh, that's how you can do this sort of thing. It's how I had learned. So I wanted the Apple II to go out not as just a computer that would make a company rich. I wanted to go out as a computer that would teach other people how computers work, how to program. And we put out every bit of information we could. This was before Steve Jobs and marketing caught on to the fact that we want to keep things closed. It was as open as could be, so thousands of little companies could be started, even by high school kids. I would go visit them in their houses sometimes, and they would design little boards of electronics that could plug in and do neat little things like take in music keyboards or play good music sounds, and they write programs right and left. Thousands of companies sprung up. And the neat thing about it is we had the platform called the Apple II, and all these companies that wrote programs and designed hardware for the Apple II, printers and things, they were all selling, here's something for the Apple II, something for the Apple II, something for the Apple II. We had more publicity than you could count.
Yeah.
You know, it's continual publicity for the Apple II.
Yeah.
So we were in a sweet spot, and it took quite a long time before we had competition, and the competition really came from lower level companies, Atari, Commodore, cheaper products designed to play those games and be very nice and easy. But by then, the market that we were going after was more the business market.
Right. So let's switch gears just for a second and talk about Apple today.
Yeah.
So what's your sense? You're still involved with the company. What's your sense of what's changed since Steve died?
I don't think a lot has changed since Steve Jobs has died, but there have been a few little moves. A few little moves to being a little charitable and recognizing some, responsibilities to society that I approve of very strongly. And I don't think Apple has yet released its closed up proprietary mentality, but they have recently talked about they're looking into writing iTunes, which is the music program that goes with our iPods, writing iTunes for Android phones. So iTunes changed the whole world of music sales. Now everybody could buy their music online with iTunes, and it became #1 in the world, but we used it as a push. We're going to try to push people into iPhones because that's the only place you'll get your iPod. And if you think about the first iPod, we wrote this program, the music program iTunes, we wrote it for Windows. We gave it to Windows users so they would have a great music program and be able to buy our iPods. And it made our iPods was our second big successful product since the Apple II. That was really Steve Jobs' Apple II. It was a big hit financially and everything. But we somehow forgot the lesson of sometimes you have to open up. But Apple has been at least recently discussing writing iTunes for Android phones, because I have friends that are in the Macintosh computer world, the Apple world, and yet they have an Android phone at breakfast, and I say, what do you do for music? And they say, oh, Google Music. And I know they would love iTunes. It's just the greatest music store there is online. So Apple has missed a whole lot of things, like trying to be open, invent something good, but then open it to the whole world, not just the iPhone users.
So you think that's a good idea? You think they should start to open up?
That
more?
And a few other things, yes. Not in every case. There are sometimes big benefits in being somewhat closed to guarantee user experience. But boy, when you have great things like a music business, treat it as a separate business entity.
Yeah.
You know, and we have great messaging systems, and we have video call systems that we could easily make shareable with the whole community. And I suspect the Android users would tend to come the Apple's way because the programs are so good.
Because they're facing a lot of competition now from Samsung and Android phones, and so do you think that's part of the strategy or part of the answer for Apple?
Well, I believe in competition. Apple talks like it believes in competition, but does everything it can to minimize it. I got to be honest. And Android really came from the guy who developed Android. I knew him very well. I was on his board when he developed other smartphone products before the iPhone even. And he was very much a Macintosh, make things easy, make them direct, make them understandable and simple mentality. And I'll have to be honest. I know a lot of people just get used to something and use it very, very well, but I just don't like Windows. After the Macintosh experience is so satisfying to me, I don't like Windows, but I don't mind Android. It's very, very, it's kind of similar, but the aspects of it that are similar, you click an icon and it runs a program, it runs an app. That's a very, very simple, trivial concept that's been around for a long, long time, actually. So I like the Android phones, but I like seeing what other engineers thought of in their products. What clever ideas. And I love to show off a few things that are in the Android world. I love to show off things that are in my iPhone world too. So there's, I wish they could all get along and cross-license and use the best of the best on everything.
Right.
But part of the best for Apple products is keep it so simple that mom and pop don't get scared away. And that sometimes means having a little less of all these options, at least not built in. We added the App Store later. But at first, when the iPhone first came out, it was only going to have Apple's standard apps for weather and stocks and telephone calls and messaging. So at first, it was rather limited. It was a decision that we made to open the App Store, and that's what's changed our lives so much.
Right.
I look at everything I do in the world. I want to find, if I have an app that's close to that category of thing, I love to run my apps.
Yeah. So let's talk about trends, okay? So what are some of the trends that you think are meaningful these days for this audience? And tell me what sort of gets you excited about technology these days.
Mm-hmm. The smartphones have kind of all gotten to a level where they're all pretty good. And they're all pretty equal and all pretty competent things. So, individual features, it's tough. I don't think people buy products like smartphones anymore based on features. Oh, mine has this. I cannot dare give it up. I have to make this platform choice because of one little thing. People say that all the time, but I don't really believe it. I think you want to be in the Apple group now, or you want to be kind of against the Apple people because they're so kind of religious and cultish and stuff like that. And you have friends, what your friends use. Samsung has done a really incredible job of worldwide marketing. on their products, and the trouble is, and I can't call their products lousy. I can't. Some other people in Apple can, but I can't. I don't know. I buy them and use them all. Trends. Well, a lot of people are talking about, in the press you hear commonly, wearable technologies. Google Glass is one of the big trends, and I'm just afraid it's going to go away like all those little Bluetooth earbuds that we would wear around and show off to everybody. And now who do you see with a Bluetooth earbud? Not very many anymore. Maybe some salesman at the airport. And so I'm afraid that it's going to go away. But I love the concept. I love the concept because I put on Google Glass once, and there was all my Google Now information, telling me about my life and the world and things I should know, right there visible in front of me, and I could give a few little gestures and commands to get things done. Besides photographs, all photographs is kind of neat. It takes a photograph where you are looking. That's really a neat, really a human concept. So I like that. Everybody's talking about smart watches. And there's probably going to be about 30 companies in the next year that come out with a smart watch, a little 1-inch by 1-inch square that goes on your wrist. Well, for a couple of years, I've been wearing the little 1-inch by 1-inch square called the iPod Nano with a wristband, with a watch band. And I carry it on airplanes because it's more convenient to have my music on me than have to look for a place to put my iPod down like I did in the old days. And I scroll with it with my fingers, and I say, this scrolling through menus is so neat. You could put the whole smartphone here. It'd be really neat. Well, now I've turned against that idea. I think 30 companies are going to come out with these products that kind of are Bluetooth interfaces, like a Bluetooth headset in your ear, to your real phone. But I think people are going to give them up just like they give up the Bluetooth headsets. It's an extra piece that's in the way that doesn't buy me anything more than I had. I would love to have the entire smartphone on my wrist. I'm going to tell you the truth. I would love to have it. Nothing in my pocket. It does the whole job. The battery lasts all day. It's nice and thin. It's beautiful and attractive. I want a larger screen. One idea I had once was put it on the bottom of your wrist and have little gestures that flip it out, and it changes shape. They're making flexible displays. This is the year of flexible displays. It changes shape to be flat in your hand, and you can use it two-handed and everything for texting. And then you give a little gesture that it goes back inside, folds around your wrist, ducks under your sleeve, and it's still a decent-sized screen. I would like to see something so different that everyone else is doing. That's when you know, whoa, one company hit the formula and did it right. In the past, Apple's had some of those occasions. I don't know if it's going to be this time around. They're talking about Apple's wearable watch might be, I don't know, monitoring your health and all that stuff, EKGs and all that on phones. A lot of people are building those now. Another trend is speaking to our devices. We've got Cortina on the Windows phones. I haven't tried it yet. It's brand new. And Google Now, I mean, I like speaking to Google and getting things done. I don't get answers. I really prefer Siri on the iPhone of all of them. But sometimes I ask Siri to do something or to get some information, and it doesn't get me what I wanted. It didn't seem to understand things the way a human being would have. And then I tell Siri to use Google. I just say Google, the same phrase, and Google comes back with the Google results, which usually they're based on what people are really looking for, and it's usually what a human being like myself is asking. So I like voice. Now, the fact that voice doesn't always be, my voice is not always understood. They'll get the words right, but not know what I as a human being really meant. Software, software, software to detect more and more phrases and sentences and uses of them. It'll get better and better over time. I'm noticing that Siri on the iPhone, where you can ask, what are the 5 largest lakes in California? And you'll get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What are the prime numbers greater than 87? It'll start with 89 going up. You can ask questions and get real answers. I don't want search engines that get me links that might have articles, that might have answers. What I want is the real answer sometimes. Like encyclopedia, I grew up, in a smart family, and if we had a question at the dinner table, my dad would grab the World Book Encyclopedia and look it up to get an answer. You didn't have to sit there, wow, I wonder what the answer to this question is. I wonder how far it is from San Francisco to Huntington Beach. Well, you'd look it up, get out an atlas or a map. Now you just ask Siri, how far is it? And you get an answer. I love that. It's getting more and more like you're dealing with a human being. Your smartphone is becoming like a friend in the world, your best advisor, your most trusted advisor in the world, and someday these are going to be the ones that lead us down the course of education, I hope. But they've got to they still aren't conscious. They still don't think. They still don't know how to solve problems. If we tell them how to solve a problem, they solve it really well. But they don't know how to come up with their own solutions to problems yet. That's something that's in the human mind that, you know, we've got to wait for. Intuition and hunches and something like that. And we're getting closer and closer. You look at that Watson computer beating humans on television games and doing things that are more like the way the brain really works, maybe. We just don't know the formula yet.
So we talked a little bit backstage, and our business is changing a lot, and it's getting digital and mobile and so forth, and everybody in the audience is really focused on bringing new innovative solutions to small businesses to help them generate more business and so forth. So what advice would you give to our audience about just how to be a better innovator, how to encourage innovation within the enterprise these days?
Wow, you know, the enterprise, number one, when you have an enterprise, you still got to keep the wheel turning that brings in the revenues while you're working on the change going into the future. You're working on kind of your little internal entrepreneurships. At the heart of those entrepreneurships, yeah, you can find really bright people that kind of think not in logical terms, but a step above them. They kind of encapsulate them into categories. They kind of sound a little odd. Sometimes those people are BSers and sometimes they aren't. Steve Jobs was really good at telling the difference. That was one of his great aspects, especially when he came back. But so you need a couple of those people around, as well as the real solid core workers that can turn things into software, turn them into real working applications. But you got to have a couple of generalists that like to use it themselves. Look at the best products ever made. I designed the Apple II because it was exactly the machine I wanted to solve my engineering work at Hewlett-Packard and to play games that I liked. And I just built this machine so beautiful for myself. And you look at the iPhone. Steve Jobs didn't show it off to Bill Gates years in advance like he did the Macintosh. He kept it secret, worked on it tightly, but it was like he was so involved with the project and the minute details, it was for himself. Look at the Tesla automobile. It's so clear that Elon Musk, head of Tesla, wanted that car for himself. He drives it for himself, makes decisions about the car and the business model of the company based on that. And these great, great products that come along are usually like that, until you get into the habit of now our company's making money and we got formulas for making money and we don't really have to be like, I want it myself and it has to be the best in the world. So you need a couple of thinkers like that, and sometimes it's even good for a CEO to be in touch with young people. I know even Steve Jobs was, up near the end, and in my travels I just love meeting young people. They full of ideas. Here's the problem. If you read a lot of technical journals, you read a lot of magazines that are in your business, you'll always have a lot of this idea, that idea. You'll know what's going on, and you can seem really, really smart. And if you're a young kid who's almost like wild and ADD and spousing ideas and excited, you'll have a ton of things you can say, but do they really add up? You want to find the person that's been a builder, a person who has actually built successful solutions, software or hardware, in the past, as kind of like, I don't know, a right-hand man to the CEO. Somebody that's sort of in charge, has some sort of authority over allowing products that come from engineers to go ahead or get revised. One trick we did at Apple for a while, we had the guy that came into Apple and said, you've got to make it so easy. You've got to make the manual smaller. People have got to look at a screen and understand things. It's got to be intuitive. I just know what to do to get done what I want. Jeff Raskin was his name. He ran publications, and the rule in Apple was if engineers designed something, they had to go to the manual writer. And the manual writer had to write it down, a description of how it worked. And if it was too complicated for the manual writer, they could make the engineers go back and have to totally wipe it out and do it a different way or change it.
Interesting.
So you put that, it's got to be used by a human in the end, and that's got to be the highest goal. And yes, sometimes it moves a deadline, it moves a project past its original intended deadline, but it's getting so good, so good, so good that any competition isn't going to do it as well.
So I'm gonna ask Steve one more question, and then we'll probably open it up for audience Q&A. And I'm gonna switch gears with you just a little bit, because I don't know if you know, but Steve was a 5th grade teacher for 8 years.
Yeah.
Right? So we've got a pretty serious education problem in this country, and we're falling behind other countries. And I just wonder if you've got some thoughts on what's missing. What do we need to do as a society to get back on track?
Okay. Well, when I was very, very young, told my dad that I was going to be an engineer first and a 5th grade teacher second. Well, later in life, Apple had been all successful, and I had always paid attention in all my university courses and books I read and articles in magazines, anything having to do with the development of a child's mind. I cared so much about children being, growing up and having a place in society and a place in the world and ways to make things and be creative. I really cared so much. Well, by then I had my own kids, and I was giving computers to schools, but if you have money, giving money is really artificial. It's not really, doesn't really speak to your heart. You give something precious like your own time. So I went and I gave my own time. I said, I will teach 5th graders how to use computers for every normal school subject. I'm not going to teach them to be computer geeks like me. That's not fair. And I'll always favor a few. No, I'm going to teach them how to use it and make your homework look good. If a teacher praises your homework, they act like you're smart. You want to be smarter yet, and you want to study even harder maybe. And had a great time. I taught eventually 6th to 9th graders, and I taught teacher groups. I was teaching 7 days a week at one point. I'd write all my lessons myself in the mornings and then teach them in the afternoons. Did that for 8 years. I thought, with my background in computers are going to change education forever, because a student no longer goes home, does their homework, and has to wait, 16 hours till they're in class to find out if their homework was right or wrong. I mean, when a dog poops on your floor, do you slap his face 16 hours later? Doesn't, you want the immediacy of reward and punishment, and computers can at least give it to you when they're teaching you. But I thought these computers as tools, the internet was just starting to come. Man, and I spent a lot of money in those early days to get the internet to all the schools and to all my students and dial-in numbers, phone line dial-in. But that was so important. And I thought computers were going to make a difference in how smart people came out of school. That eventually they were going to be coming out so smart that we old fogies would just be not needed anymore. I was actually scared when I was 20 years old in our homebrew computer club, 24 years old, and they were talking about how smart these kids were going to come out of school, the social benefits of having computers at home, and I got scared that these kids were going to put me out of business in 2 years, and I was an engineer at Hewlett-Packard, a young engineer. Eventually what I look back is that the computers have come into schools in so many ways. When I started, they weren't in the students that young, it wasn't in their hands. Now almost every student has their computers, and it's their key academic tool. Has it really made an intelligence, a difference in how intelligent the kids are when they get out of school, how smart they are, how good of thinkers they are, and I don't see the difference. People kind of come out knowing the sorts of things, having the same thinking abilities they had before. So I kind of look at it as a failure of this one ideal social goal, which was to improve education along with other social goals. And I think, what's the problem? When I taught, I discovered that it was so easy. A good teacher who cares can never fail one-on-one. One teacher, one student. If you have one teacher and 6 students, you can do an extremely good job knowing every one of them and keeping them all involved and helping each one with their individual problems. But once you have 30 students, you can't deal with the individual problems and keep them all up to speed. It's easy for they learn that they can just sort of doze off and not pay attention and not get caught. And class size became very crucial to me. California was 50th in the nation in class size due to Proposition 13, and we were far beyond Mississippi that was 49th. And I thought that was the most important thing in education, class size. We're at the lowest. How could we ever get to one-on-one? Well, a computer is a low-cost teacher. A computer is affordable. You can afford one computer per student. But it hasn't happened yet. Why not? Well, the computer is not a teacher. It's not a human. It's not a human guide. It doesn't look at a student's face and know what they're thinking. But someday, I'm hoping that we can have a computer that is sort of like one of those, like a robot. It's just so lively, entertaining, it becomes a student's best friend. It knows the student's heart and soul. It has feelings for the student. It knows about everything they're doing in life and their family. And then every student can choose what direction they want to go much earlier in life than choosing your major in college. You can choose what direction you want to go. towards the math and science, towards literature, towards history, understanding of history. You can choose that, and then you can go at your own speeds. Today in school, you have a test on Friday covering certain pages in the book. Everyone has the same test. The right answer is the same answer as everyone else. It's not your own answer that came from your own thinking. And so schools discourage a lot of creative thinking themselves just by how they're set up. They have to be that way to handle all the numbers of kids in an affordable fashion. Teachers would much rather teach poorly than well, because they get paid more money for teaching a class of 30 than teaching a class of 20. You get more money. So schools have all these problems. When we can get to one teacher per student that acts like a human being, that really knows you, that's a conscious computer. I'm still hoping that someday, I don't know for a fact, but someday we have a chance that, yes, we could really improve the whole education outcome forever. A lot of fights to go. It's a long ways off. Yep. Long ways off even before we have a computer that can think like a human.
Yep. Okay, so let's open it up for questions for the audience. Do we have it?
Any insight on artificial intelligence coming up soon?
Artificial intelligence is sort of what I was describing. First of all, when I speak something into my phone and it gets the words right, but it doesn't know what I'm really asking, and a human would. Every step we take to make it better and better and better is more like a human. But it's artificial intelligence. We do not know the wiring of a brain. So we don't know how to create a brain yet. A lot of people are struggling and trying to figure out what the formula for a neuron is and combining a lot of them. Someday, somebody's going to accidentally hit a formula and wind up with a machine that, by listening to people over a period of maybe a year, 2 years, starts to learn to talk. You know, we don't even think of building machines like that. We want to build them that they'll work right away and they're pre-programmed. So it's very difficult to say we'll get to real intelligence, but that's what I want. Ray Kurzweil wrote a book called The Singularity. And he looked at computers and how much information they can process per second, you know, how much information they can process, and the curves are going up and up and up, exponential curves. And eventually they're going to get to where they cross over the human mind, the abilities of the human mind to process information. At that point in time, theoretically, computers might be as smart as humans. They'll at least be able to do as much thinking as humans. And that point in time is about 20 years from now. The curves predict that. And I said, no, we'll never ever make a computer as smart as a human mind. I've said this since I was in high school, and I wrote a program that tried every possibility 1,000,000 times a second on my computer to solve a chess problem. And I figured out later it was not going to have the answer for 10 to the 25th years, which is longer than the universe has been around by far. And what that taught me was a fast computer doesn't solve a problem. It's a human approach to the brain coming up with formulas. I didn't think we'd ever get there. And then one day I thought, yes, we are. Just a few years ago, I finally thought, I was on a panel with Ray Kurzweil, and I thought, you know, his methods of predicting the future are correct. And you can't see the future ahead of time. When things are growing on what's called exponential curves, they hardly change, hardly change, hardly change, and then all of a sudden they're there. Like enough memory in a computer to hold one song we never imagined in the early days of computers. But all of a sudden it hits and it's there. So we're not going to realize it until all of a sudden these computers are doing some kind of autonomous thinking, processing on their own. Yeah, and I'm really hopeful that it'll improve education, and I'm hoping that once the computers are smarter than humans, that they won't take over. Are we creating the next species? Are they going to run companies faster? Are they going to make more money when they skip the slow humans? I'm hoping that's not the result. I'm hoping they help us still be the God.
I think Gary had a question there.
So Woz, this is great. I was one of those guys when the Apple II came out that, you know, was doing ledger sheets and manually, and I walked in the computer store, saw VisiCalc, and said, oh my God, it's changed my life, you know. And then years later, the next time was the Apple Lisa. I know it wasn't a success, but you know, I went, oh my God, something big is changing here. Can you just talk about the Lisa for a minute and how that came about, and I don't know, just what your involvement was?
I am so thankful you asked that. After the Apple III, the next computer that Apple's business people went to work on was called the Lisa. We went down, a bunch of us, and to Xerox Park Center, and we saw this computer with a mouse and a cursor on a screen. And it wasn't that striking in terms of hardware to somebody like me, because I grew up with what was called, I had a lot of background designing chips, the things computers are made out of, and we had digitizing tables where you moved a thing around a big table and clicked here and moved it here and clicked and moved it there and clicked, and it had strings horizontally and vertically to measure where it was. But this mouse, we saw the windows and all that. Steve Jobs instantly said, look, Woz took $50,000 computers and built them for $1,000. That's what we've got to do. We've got to take this $50,000 Xerox computer. We're the company that can figure out how to build it for $1,000. We'll do our little Woz magic on it. And he wanted to bring it into Apple. The trouble is, Steve didn't have any engineering background. He didn't know design, hardware or software. Never wrote a program. And he didn't know what it would take in terms of parts and cost to build this machine. And we built it. It was called the Lisa. By the time we were done, just 1 megabyte of memory, pipsqueak, compared to what you have today, nothing in memory, was the minimum to really do the job the right way in computer terms. That much memory cost $5,000 back then. So the Lisa wound up costing $10,000. That's $20,000 today. You aren't going to open up a personal computer market at $20,000. People aren't going to spend $20,000 for one home computer, but this Lisa was like nothing anyone had ever seen. It had 7 great pieces of software that came with it called the Lisa Office. Incredible machine. That was going to be the machine of the future. Steve Jobs had the right vision. He just didn't realize what it was going to cost. And meanwhile, he had shown it to Bill Gates, so Bill Gates knew what direction Apple was going in now. And the Lisa was just a beautiful machine. I dearly love it. What we should have done, it's bad to go back and say you should have done something different. But what if we had kept the Lisa secret, like we did the iPhone? You know, when Steve Jobs returned, he'd learned a few lessons. Keep it secret, work on it, work on it, work on it. The cost of memory chips comes down and down and down and down. It's just a part of, it's called Moore's Law. Down and down and down and down. Wait 5 years and that Lisa's going to be cheap as a non-mouse computer. Wait it out and then work on software and get it so well developed, we would have owned the world if we'd kept it secret, I think. Eventually, and the Lisa failed because of cost, but it was a good computer. Now the Macintosh came after the Lisa, and I was on the Macintosh group, but then I had a plane crash, and 5 weeks after amnesia, I called up Steve Jobs and said, I'm going back to Berkeley to get my degree. So I went back to Berkeley under the fake name Rocky Raccoon Clark, because my name was known, and I got my real bachelor's degree in computer science finally. I'm about the only one who started a computer company that did. But Steve Jobs took over the Macintosh project from Jeff Raskin, the guy who believed in easy-to-use computers, and he was doing a very radical, different computer than ever before. Steve Jobs took it over and turned it into a low-cost version of the Lisa, because the Lisa group had kicked him out of their building. They wouldn't let him in, because every time he walked in, he started calling engineers idiots, and you know, and
Worse.
they didn't know how to build things.
Worse, right?
Worse, yeah. Yeah, that's Steve. So, so he took over Macintosh, the most creative people in Apple, kind of the ones who couldn't get a job in other departments, but they were great designers and thinkers. The trouble is, the Macintosh was not built as a computer core from the software and the hardware according to the rules of computer engineering. The Macintosh was more a program to look like, to simulate, sort of artificial intelligence, simulated intelligence, to simulate the Lisa world. And it didn't have the guts inside for things like running multiple programs and allocating computer resources to programs that needed them. All the sorts of things you do correctly in the computer world, it did almost every one of them wrong. So it was a beautiful vision, but it was also still too early. It had no software, it wasn't going to sell right away. And, but I'm out of your question of the Lisa. So the Mac failed hard. By the way, when the Mac failed, and our stock dropped to half of what it had been in a week. So you see, that was I mean, we had a factory to build 80,000 Macs a week, a month, and now we were selling 500 a month. It was a real hard drop because it didn't have any software, and it was going to take, so after Steve Jobs left, I'll point this out, after he left, the people that he said were against him were the ones we all believed in, this Macintosh being our future. And the Apple II was going to fade out, and the Macintosh was the way people were going to go. We did work on some new Apple II projects right away because you got to keep your revenue coming in the door. That's number one. And we worked hard for 3 years doing everything you could ever think of doing to make the Macintosh market, which we finally did. But it was a lot of hard work, and I don't know. Those were bad times for Apple. Some of the things that go on.
Right here, Gene. White shirt.
Front row advantage. Oh.
I want to get your take on Facebook's recent $2 billion deal for Oculus Rift right down here in our backyard in Aliso Viejo, and if you've the virtual reality headset maker, if you've seen the technology up close, and if you have any thoughts on potential future applications.
Yeah, Oculus Rift, for those that don't know, it's a thing you wear over your eyes, and it has a couple of very high resolution displays, so you see things in 3 dimensions, like you're in a virtual reality world. You're walking around. You could even see this building, believe it or not, with those on, if this building was programmed into it. And the whole idea is for future games, you'll walk yourself through the games as though you're really in those places, and it'll be much more realistic. I have tried them on, only a couple of times. You could theoretically do the same thing for a little piece of cardboard with one iPhone in it, or one smartphone that has the left and the screen divided into a left and right eye. I've also seen that one recently at the big electronics show CeBIT in Germany. Vodafone was showing that off, and it was very much the similar experience. But the high quality is going to make the difference. Another thing that will make difference is if you're playing games, you want to know where your hands are moving, so the thing can create an artificial hand in front of your face. You know, if you're waving a sword with your hand, so that means you have to have sensors that go on your hand and notice when certain motions you're making. And at first I thought $2 billion. Everybody says that's so high. And gosh, if there's real low-cost alternatives, it's easy for other people to do. But I've changed my mind. I think it's actually going to be worth the $2 billion. It is going to be the next grabbing thing in, I should have pointed that out as one of the future trends, that this is where games are going to go. But more than games, even the guy that's working on manufacturing a car in a factory is going to be able to have a much clearer, better world. It's going to be very attractive. Things that are fun, things that you like doing, are usually, if you use yourself as a guide to the rest of humans, it's usually a good sign of where people are going to want to go. Not always right, could be wrong on this one, but I'm betting on Oculus Rift having been a good purchase for Facebook, and get them into some really some sweet territory in the near future. And they've seen more than we have. To make that purchase, they saw a lot more in the way of demos and what's coming out. So they know a little more of what the real future is, and we're just guessing where it could go. So I buy into that, yeah.
Do you still do design work for free?
Say it again?
Do you still do design work for free?
I would still do design work for free. I do everything I can for free. Trouble is, I'm very busy these days. Believe it or not, I don't know why. Steve Jobs' death and movies coming out. I get a lot of invites to be speaking on stages, and I'm so busy with that. I don't have time to do the sort of engineering I did when, you know, it was like my mind was working 16 to 20 hours a day. Even while I was sleeping, I'd go to sleep with computer problems and wake up in the middle of the night and have solutions. So I'm not that kind of engineer anymore. It's for the young people. Look at all the major startups that go off in new directions. Facebook, Google, Apple, Yahoo, Microsoft. It's all young people that kind of aren't tied to the past. So no, that was a fun time in my life because I had such good abilities. The parts that I used to design with, the sort of the expertise that I have doesn't apply today because the chips got bigger, denser, more powerful, huger, and not that you can actually go at home and buy the chip and wire it up yourself. You kind of have to have a microscope just to see individual little pins you're trying to connect them to. No, it's not my thing these days. I wish. But in the ways I can, anytime when I find people and I can kind of help them with some little advice, especially young people starting companies, I offer it. That's the best I can do for them. They got to get their own engineer, though. And I always advise, don't come up with ideas on paper alone. Please, engineers are trained to solve problems, to think out new, weird thoughts, go in original directions out of the box, and have some engineers with you when you're deciding what your company's going to make. Before you raise money, try to have a working model that was created by the engineers. Don't just sell it as an idea on paper to venture capitalists. That's my advice to young people.
Pardon me one second. Do you see Moore's Law peaking?
Do I see Moore's Law peaking? Moore's Law is based on the fact that we manufacture the brains of computers, the thinking parts from the neurons up. We manufacture them by a technique that photographically, one year we could put 1 transistor on a piece of silicon, and then eventually we could put 6 on, and 10 on, 100, and 1,000, and now we put 10 billion. 10 billion transistors on a piece of silicon for the same cost. So that means over my life, the cost of smart electronics has dropped 10 billion times. You can have 10 billion times the computer for the same price. And that's due to this law called Moore's Law. Well, if Moore's Law keeps going, Moore's Law says every 18 months you double the number of neurons you can put on silicon. Are we at the end of it? I believe we are at the end of it, or extremely close. We're getting down to the latest chip factories didn't shrink as much as they had percentage-wise on the size on the chips. They didn't go as far with Moore's Law as they had in all the prior generations of these multi-billion-dollar chip-making plants had gone. And also we're down to the point that I'm very familiar with NAND flash memories. These are the memories in your iPhone, in your smartphones, in your tablets, in a lot of your computers nowadays. These have made a lot possible from iPods on. They are the main storage that's made, the main type of memory that's made. They are storing ones and zeros, the numbers of computers, in as little as 8 electrons. You know, how much lower can you go before you have no reliability at all? No expectations at all of it working. We can make up to some extent today with error correction codes. A certain number are going to be wrong when we read them. The 8 electrons, we aren't going to be able to detect it precisely, but we'll correct it because we'll notice the numbers. We have, you know, redundant codes. I think we're really close to the end of Moore's Law in the original perspective, you know, yeah. And for a while, maybe they're going to try to come up with chips that are doubled in size to try to double it in another dimension, but I don't see any easy way to say Moore's Law is going to continue. And Moore's Law is one of the reasons we probably won't get in 20 years to a computer that's as smart as a human. So that's sort of a good side.
Okay.
This is, sorry about that, it's kind of personal. You are quite the iPhone prankster. And if you could tell the crowd back in the day to bring Steve Jobs a little humility, is there anything that you can remember that was pretty funny that you ever did on him?
Oh my gosh. The prank, Steve and I played pranks together, and I played some on him way back when we were friends. At Apple, some people become off territory, especially people that don't laugh at jokes a lot. The people that you play jokes with, it's fun to play jokes on them and they love it, and I love it. I taught my own students, always play a joke on the teacher first. You know, if you have a shocking pen, leave it on their desk. But I'll go back to a couple with Steve Jobs. One, oh my gosh, we had discovered the blue box and how to make free calls all over the world, and Steve Jobs said, let's sell it, and it was so much fun. I swear to God, Apple wouldn't be here today. I agree with Steve. If we hadn't done that blue box, that was our first little company together. We made a little money even, but it wasn't my idea to make money, just to make the blue box. But we went over to a payphone. We knew all these little phone tricks, went to our high school, and by the cafeteria there were 2 payphones. I installed a switch that if you kicked the switch, both payphones would get a dial tone. and then, so Steve and I would go out there, and with our blue box, we'd be calling numbers all over the world, testing things and seeing what we could do. Well, I made an emergency interrupt. Even though I was standing right next to him, he didn't hear me. I made an emergency interrupt from George Alex, who was known as the chief special agent of the phone company. All of a sudden, Steve Jobs hangs up his phone. He says, we have to run. We have to get out of here. They're right here. That was fun. Another one we did, we spent 4 nights in a row, and Jobs sort of flaked out. He only did about 2 or 3 of those nights, but me and my friend Alan Baum finished it. And we wound up with a structure with 2 wooden ramps, skates on them that would roll down when we cut a 40-pound fishing line down below. It was a 2-story building. Right where the students come off the graduation, half the students came out right in front of this building, and we had a sheet that would drop down and had the Brazilian best wishes sign that said best wishes. The Brazilian good luck sign. It's not really a Brazilian good luck sign, but we like to tell it that way. And that was a fun one. Did that one with Steve Jobs, and we did another one. It didn't come off because some other senior pranksters set off our sign the day early. But we went to another one. Steve had figured out how to turn the sprinklers on to all the fields on the school. And during graduation, the parents sat on the football field. And so we were going to go into the shed and attach a little fishing line the night before the graduation so we could pull the main switch, the master switch, and the switch for the football field. And then my idea was epoxy the container shut so the janitor can't run over and turn it off. We had tested the idea at Cupertino High School at another football game, and somebody ran over and turned it off right away. So we worked at that one and just couldn't get into the right part of the shed where the switches were. But, you know, we tried. I only tell these stories because maybe to this day, somebody back at that school will hear me and go do it. Yeah, but actually from the time we started Apple, and Steve was going to be kind of ahead of a company, and that was his goal in life, he stopped being the same kind of joker, prankster, and even talking about fun things to press. No, he had to be the businessman that would be the CEO someday. But you never stopped. I never stopped.
let's do one more.
Hi, Steve. First of all, thank you for your innovations. I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for your work.
Thank you.
I have a question about the timing of two technologies that will impact two businesses of mine. I have a computer repair company called Geeks On Site, and one technology that I know is coming is the desktop and laptops as we know them today will no longer have an OS and all that work done locally. Everything's going to be on the cloud, and they're just going to be dummy devices. So the first question is about the timing on that, and when do you foresee that we're not going to use these systems like we do today?
Yeah, this has already happened to almost a complete extent. Look at the major devices we use, tablets and smartphones. Everything you're doing on them, except for maybe some games, most of it's all coming from the internet. That means it's all coming from big data centers hold the computers that are doing the computing, that are analyzing information off of hard disks and deciding what to send for you to see. So we're already talking about little display ports. And now the computers, a lot of what you do on your computer at home, you're always on the internet. So a lot of that, web pages are created outside of your computer, and all your computer does is display it well. We've pretty much gotten to this cloud world. I recognize it's caused me a lot of worries because I always click, I agree, okay, I accept these terms. I don't know what they are, but I know that I didn't write the contract, and so every time I put anything in the cloud or trust the cloud for something or set up an account, I know that I've agreed that anything goes wrong, I'm the loser, and you have no responsibility for it. I also, if I put something on the cloud, I will not necessarily get it back. I actually believe we should have back in World War II days, the United Nations got every civilized country in the world to sign a Declaration of Human Rights. I wish they would do something like that for a Declaration of Human Rights in the cloud world, or Declaration of Computer Rights that we own. If you own something, if you bought something and you put it on the cloud or it's held in the cloud for you, songs or whatever, you own it and it can't go away. And they are responsible to keep it protected, to always deliver it to you if you need it, to give it back to you, and to keep it secure from inspection. And that would include email, but that's just a dream of mine. I'm going to start talking more and more in that direction and hope it starts catching on.
Steve, but any idea on the timing of how many years away do you think we are from this no longer being?
How many years am I away from to where our computer really is much less of a computer, our laptop is much less of a laptop and only a display port? And I'm saying it's pretty much thoroughly happened, although it doesn't have to be that way. There are still things that you can run on that do your own computing, maybe your own spreadsheet program, not on the cloud, but everything is going towards the cloud. And I sort of think it's an over game. It's not something we can stop, pull back, reverse. So it's going to keep going. Less and less you have on your own that you own that you can even protect the security of. You know, it's like if I own something, I can always protect its security. I wouldn't lose it. But if it's often in the cloud, my passwords and all that, they're going to get found more and more. You know, we're seeing it's going to accelerate how fast those things disappear. So I don't really like the fact that it's happening. I think there's a lot of problems with it, and I think we should address it and make it more like it is something I really own and is mine. As far as our computer value, I don't know. There's still, I think it's still going to be just lower level of your computer doing its own computing. For example, grabbing information off of hard disks and displaying it for you and all that. A little bit less and less.
Second timing question, and this is to follow up with your comments about Siri and that technology. I got into the call center business now because of this concern about the computing business. How long do you see before call centers have to staff a lot less because they're replacing agents with computers talking back and forth?
I don't know exactly what you mean by call center. The first thing I think of is the telemarketers and the houses that call to sell me pens.
Telephone answering service specifically, where messages are taken and dispatched.
Okay, and what do I think?
Of the timing of when Siri will evolve more to the point where Siri will be having that conversation back and forth.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it, but I say look at trends, and the trends, you can tell that they're not stoppable. You can't stand in the way and stop it, that eventually it's probably going to be all that much more local to Siri than the call center. Someday, but not instantly. Large things don't go away instantly.
Thank you.
We could probably go on all day long, but we got to wrap this up. So let's give a warm welcome to Steve. Hey, thank you so much.
Oh, good being here.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.